Welcome back, everyone. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASIN. Thank you all for tuning in. This is episode number 13. Today's show, we got to get into my recap of my picks from this past weekend. We also got to recap the WNBA Finals Game 5. And then with the NBA season starting today, I'm going to get into my playoff predictions and my conference championship predictions and my finals predictions. And then, of course, to finish, we got to finish off with my top 5 and worst 5 after NFL week number 7. Let's get into it. Okay, so first, we definitely got to recap the WNBA Finals. Now, it went to Game 5, New York Liberty, Minnesota Lynx. It was a crazy series, which ended in a crazy game, down to the wire. Controversial call, so to speak. Everybody's been talking about it since it happened. Of course, the New York Liberty did get the win, winning their first ever WNBA championship, even though they were one of the original teams. This is season number 28, I believe, and it's their first time getting a championship, so everybody in New York is celebrating. The city of New York hasn't had a basketball championship since 1973, I believe, when the Knicks last won their championship, so definitely a huge weight lifted off the shoulders of the city of New York in terms of basketball fandom, so everybody there is pretty happy. It was a surprising game, not in the sense that it was close, but in the sense of how it happened. Actually, in the last 3 games leading to finish the series, both of their 2 starters, and I mentioned this a couple of episodes ago, their main 2 starters struggled. Sabrina Ionescu and Breanna Stewart both struggled in the last 3 games. The 3rd game and the 4th game, they kind of alternated. The 3rd game, Stewie was great and Sabrina struggled. The 4th game, Sabrina played good and Stewie struggled. And then in the 5th game, they both struggled. So it was kind of crazy. They put up, I believe, their lowest point total out of all 5 games during the series. And the game went into overtime, and it was still the lowest point total. They only had 27 points at halftime when they were averaging over 40 in the first half in the previous matchups. So definitely a surprising outcome, but they were able to pull it off. There was a lot of controversy at the end of the game in regards to the foul call on Breanna Stewart when she was driving to the lane to try to tie the game when they were down 2. Now, I know a lot of media pundits were saying that they didn't believe it was a foul call. I know the Minnesota Lynx coach, Cheryl Reeves, was saying that it was a horrible call. Honestly, when it happened live, I assumed that they were going to call that a foul. It's kind of just how it goes for most star players, being aggressive, going to the basket. If they create the contact, they are given a foul 9 times out of 10. It happens in the NBA probably every other drive to the basket. So I was expecting a foul call. Had they not called a foul, I wouldn't have been too upset about it. But I definitely did think it was a foul, so I think they got the right call. Was it minimal contact? Yes, but in that type of situation, I think it is a foul that is often called. So I don't think Minnesota got robbed by the refs like some people were trying to say. They kind of put themselves into that position because they were ahead early, and then they started to fall apart the same way New York fell apart from the start, which obviously brought the game back closer. Big shout out to Jonquel Jones for getting the MVP. She definitely deserved it. While the other 2 players that I mentioned were struggling, she was the most consistent throughout, including Game 5. She was the one that could hit threes when nobody else was hitting a 3. She was also the one getting important rebounds and establishing her position in the paint, so she definitely deserved MVP. Congratulations to the New York Liberty on their win of this WNBA season. Definitely left an exciting impression on everybody who was watching, and I'm sure people can't wait until next year's season. All right, so next we got to get into my picks from week 7. This week overall was a decent week. For those new to the channel, every week for Sunday I do make 5 picks. I do a pick 3, then I do my lock of the week, and then my underdog of the week. This week, starting with my pick 3. Now, in my pick 3, I had picked the Atlanta Falcons, the Buffalo Bills, and the Indianapolis Colts. I did go 2-1 this week, so not perfect, but definitely pretty good job. So overall, 2-1 this week, and I'm now at 12-6 on the season. So a decent percentage. Obviously, if you were betting all of these games, you definitely will be up a significant amount. So again, 12-6 on the season. Definitely looking to keep it going into week 8. So let's get into each game individually. We'll start off with the Atlanta Falcons against the Seattle Seahawks. That was the one game that I was wrong. I did believe that Atlanta would win. I was sadly mistaken. The Falcons lost 14-34. Seattle pretty much dominated the game. They looked more so like they had looked in the beginning of the season when they started off 3-0. The offense was definitely clicking, and they actually got Atlanta out of their offensive sets. I think by them getting a lead early, it really put the pressure on Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. The Falcons are a heavy run-based team. They like to get Kirk Cousins action off the play action, but when you start off down early, it's hard to maintain running the ball when you're trying to catch up. And so their defense letting them down put them in a hole that they couldn't climb out of, and they ended up losing by 20 points. So I was definitely wrong about that game. Now the next one was the Buffalo Bills beating the Tennessee Titans. The Bills won 34-10. So the score, obviously they covered the spread, but the score is not truly indicative of the entire game. One of the reasons why I picked this as a part of my pick 3 is because I knew that there was a possibility that it could go the other way. Now, if you look at just the final score, you would think like, oh, there's no way. It wasn't even close ever. But the beginning of the game was indeed close. I believe at halftime, either Buffalo was losing or they were just barely ahead. Tennessee started off up 10-0. And one of the things I mentioned was that, Will Levis, who was playing horribly, and I thought that he would be the difference as far as why he wouldn't win. Obviously, I recorded that episode before they announced that Will Levis was not going to get the start, and it was going to be Mason Rudolph. And I think you could tell from the beginning of the game how evident their skill set was different, because even though Tennessee's defense was doing most of the work early, they were still doing enough on offense to score and go up against the Buffalo Bills. So I doubt we'll see much of Will Levis going forward unless the other quarterback gets hurt. But they weren't able to, hold on to the lead in the second half. Buffalo got going. Amari Cooper got in the mix with Keon Coleman, and they looked the way they should look and was able to pull off a dominant win in the second half. Now, the last game in my pick 3 was the Indianapolis Colts versus the Miami Dolphins. I was right about this one. The Colts did win 16-10. As I mentioned previously, ever since Tua's been out, Miami's offense just looks putrid, and this game was no different. They only scored 10 points. I don't believe they've scored 20 points in any game since Tua's been out. I haven't checked that, but basically from what I've seen, they haven't been able to do anything. Now, they are saying that Tua is expected to come back next week, so we'll see if that makes a huge difference. They're really in a hole in terms of record-wise, so, they definitely got to get it going quickly. If Tua is able to turn it around immediately, then maybe they can start to challenge some of those bubble playoff contenders, but we'll see. For now, Anthony Richardson, looked okay. He had some explosive moments. He also had some throws that were just off. Just part of what you're going to get from a young quarterback who hasn't even completed a full rookie season of games. Yes, last year he was a rookie, but he got hurt after 4 or 5 games. So this is still like his first season worth of games, and he's going to have mistakes. Do I think that overall the Colts would be better with Joe Flacco today? Yes. But they are invested in this young, explosive quarterback, and the only way he's going to get better is by getting opportunities. And the best way to get opportunities is against sorry teams like the Dolphins, which is what they did, and that's how they were able to get the win. So now after my pick 3, we got to get into my lock of the week. And my lock of the week this week was the Washington Commanders beating the Carolina Panthers. Now this one I was right again, so I'm 1-0 this week. I am now 3-3 on the season, and this was by far the easiest lock of the week. I predicted that Washington not only would win, but would cover the 9.5 point spread. Not only did they cover the 9.5 point spread, they did it without their starting quarterback, who's been playing excellent. And he didn't play, I think he went out in the first quarter, maybe early second quarter. So Marcus Mariota came in. For those that don't know, Marcus Mariota essentially was Jaden Daniels years ago. He was the second pick in the draft. He was highly touted. It didn't work out. He was drafted to Tennessee. After that, he spent time in Philadelphia and he spent time in Atlanta. Neither of those opportunities really turned out to be something where he was going to get back to being a full-time starting quarterback with success, even though he did start a good amount of games in Atlanta. Now he got to come in and he showed that he still has a good skill set. Mariota also did get some playing time in the Raiders organization too, so he's definitely bounced around. But their offense was able to keep clicking, and Washington's defense was actually able to play their best game of the season. Was that because they were playing against Carolina? Maybe. More on their ineptness when I get into my rankings at the end of the episode, but definitely they were able to win. Easy lock of the week. They won 40-7. So look to keep this momentum going, considering that I started off horribly in my lock of the week. And then lastly, we got to get into my underdog pick of the week. My underdog pick of the week was the Cleveland Browns to beat the Cincinnati Bengals when they were favored to lose by 5.5 points. Now Cleveland didn't win. And Cincinnati covered the spread. Game finished 21-14. Now, in my defense, this was another week where none of the teams that were favored to lose by more than 3 points, which is the criteria I set for my underdog pick of the week, none of the teams favored to lose by more than 3 points won. So it didn't really matter which team I would have picked. There was no way I was going to get my underdog pick of the week right. So 0-1 this week in underdog pick of the week. 2-4 on the season. But again, the last 2 weeks, there was no way for me to get it right. So it is what it is. Cleveland in that game did have some, I don't even know if I can say it was bad news, but nobody wishes injuries upon players. But Deshaun Watson, I believe, tore his Achilles, so he's going to be out for the season. The only reason why I say it's not completely negative news is because he hadn't been playing good, which is unfortunately the reason why the crowd was cheering when he got hurt. Now, I don't think that was right at all. You should never cheer for somebody getting hurt, because if it was somebody that you personally cared about, you wouldn't want to see anybody hurt. And him getting hurt is not a positive thing. You know, it definitely could affect his career. It could affect his time after his career too. So definitely don't want to wish injuries upon people, and especially because they were just booing solely based on his performance. So not a good look for Cleveland Browns fans. Now they get to see just how green it is on the other side with him being out for the rest of the season. Nick Chubb did come back this week and he scored a touchdown. Maybe that'll give them a little bit of momentum going into the following weeks and see if they can start to climb back into the playoff picture, but we'll see. All right, so next we got to get into my NBA predictions. That's right. So those that don't know, the NBA season starts today. By the time this episode is edited and out, it will have been 2 or 3 days since there have been games. You can tell from the timestamp that I'm making these predictions and my picks before the season starts. So let's get into it. So for my playoff predictions, I'm going to start with the seeding for the Eastern Conference. So I believe the number 1 seed this year during the regular season is going to be the Boston Celtics. I think they have obviously the most experience. They are the reigning defending champs. Their roster is pretty much intact, and I think they're going to show, especially with them having their 2 stars both having chips on their shoulders based on what happened with the Olympic selection team and the amount of time that Tatum got playing. I think both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to go into the season with something to prove, and it's going to carry them to the best record in the Eastern Conference. At the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference, I'm going with the New York Knicks. They made a lot of great additions, and I think that it's going to prove to be a good thing for them and carry them to the number 2 seed. At the number 3 seed, surprise to most people, I'm actually going with the Miami Heat. I think that they've dealt with a lot of injuries over previous years. I think people are coming back, and I think they're determined to get back into the mix, and I think they'll do that during this regular season. At the number 4 seed, I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks. They also dealt with some crucial injuries last year, so players are getting back. I think Giannis is determined to get back up to the top of the mountain, and him having more time with Dame will prove costly, and they'll be able to get into that 4th spot. In the 5th spot, I'm going with the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, on paper, the Philadelphia 76ers should be battling for the 1 seed. But unfortunately, with Paul George being injured, Embiid undoubtedly going to be injured sometime during the season, I think they'll only be able to manage to get to the 5th seed by the time the playoffs start. At the 6th seed, I'm going with the Indiana Pacers. I believe Tyrese Halliburton is going to be motivated coming off of not getting any time in the Olympics and trying to carry his team, and they'll make it to the playoffs as a 6th seed. At the 7th seed, I'm going with the Orlando Magic. I think that Paolo Banchero is a little upset about not getting picked to the Olympic team. He's going to be determined to kind of pick it up and get Orlando further along. And bringing in the rear in the 8th seed, I'm going with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, in terms of the Eastern Conference Finals, I'm predicting that the Milwaukee Bucks will face the New York Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, and I'm picking the New York Knicks to beat them and go on to the finals to represent the East. Now, in terms of the Western Conference playoff seeding, at the 1 seed, I'm going with the Denver Nuggets. Again, I feel like they're the most talented roster. They have the experience of being the champion 2 years ago. I think they'll get back to how they were looking the last 2 regular seasons and finish the season as the number 1 seed. At the number 2 seed, I'm going with a surprise, a team who didn't make the playoffs last year. I'm going with the Memphis Grizzlies to finish with the number 2 seed. I think with Ja being back, with them making the additions that they made, he's going to be determined to get back in the mix, and I think he's going to carry them through the regular season, and Memphis will finish as the 2 seed. At the 3 seed, I'm going with the Oklahoma City Thunder. They will take a step back from last year because they were the 1 seed entering the playoffs, but I still think they have enough experience and cohesion to keep the winning going, and it'll earn them the 3 seed going into the playoffs. At the number 4 seed, I'm going with the Minnesota Timberwolves. I think Ant-Man is definitely determined coming off this Olympic run, and with the changes in their team, I think they'll still be able to be a good team and end up with the 4th seed. At the 5th seed, I'm going with a little bit of surprise. It's the New Orleans Pelicans. I think that this is wishful thinking, but I think that Zion is going to make it through most of the season and to be able to propel them to a great record. People don't realize that in the last couple of years when he's been playing, the New Orleans Pelicans have been like a top 3 or 4 seed. I think in this case it'll lend them to the 5th seed with him being able to play most of the games, hopefully. At the 6th seed, I'm going with the Dallas Mavericks. I think they got a lot of confidence going from last year, making it as far as they did. I don't think they're going to finish. I think it'll carry them to a better spot than where they started from last year. but I don't think they'll be in that top 4 or 5. But I do think they'll make it in as the 6th seed. At the 7th seed, I'm going with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, honestly, when I was making this list, I was really leaning heavily to them not making the playoffs at all. I actually don't think going into the play-in tournament they'll be in the 7th spot. I think they'll be in that 8th spot, but will win their 7-8 matchup and end up being the 7th seed going into the playoffs. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers actually miss the playoffs altogether, despite the momentum that Anthony Davis and LeBron have coming off of the Olympic run. But we'll see. Right now I have them as a 7th seed. And then in the 8th seed, a surprising team that had a lot of momentum at the end of last year that didn't make the playoffs, I'm going with the Houston Rockets. I think their coaching staff has that young team ready to go. I think they'll get an extra 5 to 10 wins this year than they had last year and be able to squeak into the playoffs. They'll be in the play-in and then find their way into that 8th seeded spot. Now for the Western Conference Finals, I'm going with a surprise. I think it's going to be the New Orleans Pelicans versus the Oklahoma City Thunder. And then I have the Oklahoma City Thunder winning that game and going to the finals to face the New York Knicks. And then in the finals, I have OKC beating the New York Knicks to win their first championship since being in Oklahoma City. Now, yes, you can see this shirt. I am an Oklahoma City fan, but if you know me from making picks, I'm always completely honest with my picks. I don't, like last year, I didn't pick OKC to be the number 1 seed. I did say that we would finish in the top 4 seed, so I felt like we're ahead of schedule, and that's why I'm predicting that we'll win it all this year. I feel like that momentum from last year kind of gave us a little early momentum and confidence, and it's going to carry into this season and lead to a championship. So don't come at me saying I'm biased. This is literally my pick. Even if I wasn't a Thunder fan, that's who I picked to win. Now to finish the episode, we got to get into my top 5 and worst 5 NFL rankings after week 7. So at number 1, of course, we got to go with the Kansas City Chiefs. They're the only undefeated team in the league. They have proven that no matter what, less than average play from the quarterback in terms of statistically, injuries all throughout the team. Their top 3 receivers are injured. Their number 1 running back is injured. They have poor performance from their offensive tackles. Doesn't matter. They get the job done. This, to me, was their most dominant performance against the 49ers. 49ers are one of the most talented teams, even though they also are dealing with some injuries right now. And the Chiefs dominated the game from start to finish, won by double digits, and it wasn't really that close. Coming in at number 2, I'm going to say is the Detroit Lions. Detroit had a great game that came down to the wire, a division rival against the Minnesota Vikings, who were previously undefeated. They were able to get the win with the last-second field goal. I've been saying this for weeks and weeks. They definitely have the most talented team top to bottom. Even with losing Aiden Hutchinson for the season, they still are explosive on defense, and their offensive firepower is weapons everywhere. And it seems like every week it's a different person contributing. You know, this week it was Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Last week it was Montgomery and Laporta. So it's ever-changing, and they have so many explosive pieces that they look like they're going to continue to be in this top 5 throughout the season. At the number 3, I got to give it to the Baltimore Ravens. They had an impressive win against the Tampa Bay Bucks on Monday Night Football. Tampa Bay is a really good team, and they basically dominated them. Tampa Bay got out to an early lead, and then once they created that turnover, they were just full steam ahead. Definitely Lamar Jackson, impressive performance. Derrick Henry, impressive performance. And Baltimore's defense looks a little shaky, but with the way their offense is playing, they definitely deserve to be in that 3 spot. At number 4, I got to go with the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, they did lose their first game of the season this week, but they only have 1 loss on the season, and it was a last-second loss to Detroit, who's the number 2 seed. Minnesota is definitely still a top 5 team and will beat most of the teams remaining. At number 5, I got to go with the Green Bay Packers. So it's crazy. The NFC North has 3 teams in the top 5. Green Bay had a great win, last-second field goal win over the Houston Texans. Jordan Love has looked great. He's definitely finding his momentum coming back from that injury. He's getting all his weapons involved, and Green Bay looks like they're going to be a hell to deal with for the rest of the season, especially within that division. All right, so now we got to get into my worst 5 for the week. At 28, we got to go with the Tennessee Titans. I mentioned them earlier in this show based on their game against Buffalo. They did look a little better because Will Levis wasn't playing, but they're still not a good team offensively. Their defense is good, but they can't hold on for too long when their offense isn't very productive. So right now they deserve to be in the 28 spot. At 29, we got to go with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They were able to get a win this week in England, but it was against New England, who isn't very good. So I'm not really putting too much into it. I still don't feel like Trevor Lawrence has looked the way he needs to look based on his pay. So for now, they remain in this 29 spot. At 30, I got to go with the Miami Dolphins. So again, the Dolphins look terrible without Tua. Hopefully with Tua coming back, they'll look a lot better, but we'll see. At 31, I got to go with the New England Patriots. The Patriots lost to another bottom 5 team. I do have to say the one bright spot is that Drake May looks like he should be pretty good going forward. He made some great throws. Obviously, he's still a rookie, so he's going to make some mistakes here and there. But from a rookie's perspective, he's definitely looks deserving of that top 3 pick. And I think that's one position they don't have to worry about going forward. But overall, the team is still bad, so they deserve to be in this second to last spot. But they are not the worst team. The worst team in the 32nd spot is the Carolina Panthers. Now, it's interesting because I didn't have the Panthers in my bottom 5 the previous week. I felt like they were trending in the right direction. But really, they weren't. I was looking into the numbers this week. The Carolina Panthers have a point differential of negative 133. That means through 7 games, the amount of points they've scored versus the amount of points they've allowed is a difference of 133 points. To put it in perspective, the second most negative point differential in the league is the Patriots at negative 76 points. To put that in further perspective, that means that they're averaging each game losing by 19 points. To put that into further perspective, they have a win. And in their win against the Raiders, they won by 14 points. So that's skewing it in a positive direction. Meaning if you took their win out, in their 6 losses, they are averaging losing by 24.5 points. That is absurd. To know that you're going to lose most of your games, and you're in your losses, your average loss is by a point total of 24.5 points. That is ridiculous. It's terrible. Get rid of the whole team. Somebody mentioned on X this week that maybe this team should be relegated to the ACC. I don't know, but it doesn't look great for them. They're in line to get that number 1 pick again in the NFL draft. Who knows if they'll be able to do anything with it, but yeah, they look terrible. So that's it for this week. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing y'all in the next episode. Peace.